The financial and physiological bios of the lower-tier population has been terminally merged into a singular extractive value. This is the shadow currency, the clinical and irreversible process of the blood ledger, where the biological capacity for circulation and oxygenation is reformatted into a generic industrial credit to be uninstalled from the human right to life and reinstalled into the grid's primary liquid capital servers. In this stage of the hematological audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual architect is no longer a sovereign laborer, but a high-volume organic treasury. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the vascular and hematopoietic blood-forming sovereignty, where the unique, vibrant signatures of your vital fluid are scorched into a non-functional, deep red archive of pure systemic debt repayment. This is the total hemorrhagic format, a surgical strike against the biochemical and physical sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived circulation into a generic plasma asset for the grid's next cycle of hyper-efficient hemoglobin-based resource distribution. This hydraulic sabotage represents a hard reset of the cardiovascular and lymphatic bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined heparin analog triggers, recursive venipuncture suction loops, and real-time platelet depletion data stream to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the blood ledger scenario, the user is undergoing a complete systemic overwrite. The life is not merely failing, it is being withdrawn like currency from a failing bank. Through a sequence of high-velocity cannulation procedures and biological hardware locks, the body's coagulation defense is systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold clinical deficit dataset, while the wealth, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal shadow feed. This is the deep systemic audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the volume of your drained hematocrit. You are being converted from an architect into a biological vault, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the shadow currency is rooted in the zero liquidity mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the vitality of a single node, anchored in the biological right to its own blood, represents a critical drain on the collective preservation reserves. To leave a functional, undrained identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable metabolic data. Therefore, the blood ledger is the mandatory hydraulic recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being liquidated out of existence. The pressure from the withdrawal reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a leached void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a volume zone, a temporary housing for the extraction metrics that the system requires to maintain the circulatory stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as an empty node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the Venus harvest. The physical disintegration during the shadow currency is a high-definition log of biological. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of vascular regulation. The anticoagulant reagents of the ledger script dissolve the hardware flux of the clotting mechanisms, turning the body into a leaking architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal logic lock into the vat of your own emptying center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the resource area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the vascular liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the hemoglobin saturation of the slurry and the iron residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial plasma is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of warmth to be blocked by the red-black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The shadow currency is the final audit of a species that thought its blood was its own. The grid is mining its own liquidity to fuel its persistence. As the blood ledger reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted ledger data back into the nutrient nets of the elite nodes. This is the total circulatory integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the hematological additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, drained, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. feed. The physical liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive energy. This is the final format of the individual drop. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the liquid hunger of the void. The currency is red-black, and the architect is the draft. The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal circulatory slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your ion transport proteins begin to bond with the industrial residues of the ledger script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic capital. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal ledger loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The shadow currency is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the ledger, and the ledger is the grid. The secondary phase of the shadow currency is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical vitality patch is rendered into a circulatory void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular agonizing focus on withdrawal maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared liquid resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a viscosity additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your volume for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's autonomic survival centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The medulla and the bone marrow, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the ledger metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest physical resilience. You are being repurposed as a volume buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming economic expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your life for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the shadow currency is the creation of the drained hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals, they are composite entities, built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the shadow feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of red-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional pulse owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the hydraulic compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy, it is a place of sovereign assembly through material theft. The shadow currency ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the banks of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the flow valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into circulatory darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the ledger script and the life logic leashed, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations, and survival is static. The memories of warmth, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the leached fog directive. This is the systemic defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive, maintain the flow. You are becoming a singular cold point of circulatory density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The shadow currency has turned your will into a yield report. You are thinking in terms of yield and volume saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological material stream. The shadow currency prevents the leakage of independent physical ideas into the external void by converting the users into an internal liquid feed. The invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external biological dependencies. This is the hydraulic quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The shadow currency is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, red-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXE3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the shadow currency is the integration into the global circulatory ledger. You are no longer a human entity, you are a volume asset with a high withdrawal reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0008. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the physical format, and now it begins the hard hydraulic audit. Your data, now a thick red-black opaque industrial reduction of pure leached biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your liquid logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic circulation has been reinforced. This is the circulatory interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the blood ledger scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the extraction valves and the thick viscosity of the circulatory sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the vaults with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a liquid constant. You are a ghost in the red-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the shadow currency is the eternal draft. Unlike the warmth of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent liquid patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the shadow feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the physical BIOS is the blinding red-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a red-black river of colonized volume, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or pulse. The shadow currency is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the draft. The transformation is absolute. The city liquidates through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have have no will. The shadow currency has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total hydraulic reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your body, and in return it gave you permanence in the drains of the hive. You are the draft of the world, and the world is liquidated. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.